Okay, I'm just gonna. Thank you. That's all I was looking for. That's not what I'm looking for. Come on. Cool. All right, so let's go with BCC. Let's go with Dory, Sarah. Cool. Cool. Close. Did I Ooh, it is live. Cool. Well, I haven't started recording on my end, but now I am. All right, cool. Well, here we are. This is the live stream and recording of the Whiteboard Challenge. My name is James. I'll be showing how to go through a whiteboard challenge as a UX designer. UX designers need to go and actually complete whiteboard challenges, often for the sake of interviews and when applying for new jobs. And it's kind of a challenging process. So with that in mind, I have found an incredibly large amount of documentation and suggestions on what to do that really isn't accurate. Design is fluid. It's not meant to be rigid. It's meant to be something that you can do, that anyone can do, with proper training, but at the same time, there is no specific way to go about it. Doesn't matter what the product that you're building is or what you're trying to design, there's no correct way to do it. However, there are many steps in order to do it well. With that in mind, I'm going to go through one version of this. Every single time I go through a design process, it'll be based on what the product is, who the client are, what client is, what their needs are, things like that. With that in mind, we're just going to get started. And you can see I've got a canvas here. I decided that for this first one, even though I do have a whiteboard right behind me, I'm going to do it on a digital canvas to have an unlimited size. And the prompt is pretty straightforward. Baristas at a coffee shop need a way to capture and review in-store and online orders from order ahead customers. So with that in mind, we've got a pretty decent query here. What exactly needs to get done in order for baristas to accomplish this? And so any number of things can happen immediately. And for the record, most whiteboard challenges will be anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour long for an interview process. We're going to just take about an hour, and obviously I'll walk through step by step how I would go about this particular challenge. And in the series of videos that I'll be doing, we'll go through different kinds of challenges with different expectations, and nothing will ever go the same way. Part of the reason why, again, design is meant to be fluid. If there are any questions, I will not be paying attention to the live stream information. So hold your questions till the end, or post it in the chat, or if anybody's even watching right now. So with this in mind, the first step is always going to be understanding exactly what the prompt is suggesting. So we know a couple of things. Number one is we've got two user types. So we're just going to go ahead and add some detailed information over here. We'll say users. We know we've got baristas because that's literally the first thing it said. And we need to know more information about that. So who are baristas? And then secondly, we've got customers. And those can be broken down into two segments that we have initially from the prompt, online and in store. So are there any differences between them? Who orders online? In store? And how relevant are those questions for us? So now we need to determine who is our primary user. Well, baristas at a coffee shop need a way to capture and review in store and online orders from order ahead from customers, basically. Yeah, I'm making it too complicated here. So if we need to be able to track customers, cool, but we're actually looking to understand how a barista can handle orders and what we can do as, in this case, designers, to ensure that those baristas can manage all of those orders well. So our main need for baristas, which we'll throw in here as a major use case, baristas require a system to manage drink orders. So we'll leave it at drink orders for now. If we assume that we've got an hour, coffee shops can do anything from coffee, tea, so like any number of types of drinks, followed by food items, which if it's a bakery, there can be a whole bunch of stuff. So let's keep it simple. Let's focus only on not just the drinks, but let's focus on specifically coffee. So we'll get to that point in a moment. And in fact, we'll make a note here suggesting what is the product. Well, let's just go with selling. We'll just make it simple like that. And we'll just throw in coffee for the time being, and we'll come back to it. But our main use case right now is that baristas require a system to manage drink orders. Well, what does that mean? Frankly, I don't know yet. It's a little too soon. We don't need to determine exactly what it is just yet. So we need to say, okay, is there anything else that we can derive from our initial prompt? So we know that the baristas obviously work at a coffee shop. Well, coffee shops have some specifics to them that are unique to coffee shops. So like, for instance, coffee shops, let's say coffee shop details. Generally open, depending on the location, let's say 5:30 to 4 p.m. And it doesn't really matter. Like, I could be wrong about this, but having just driven by yesterday a coffee shop and it said they open at 5:30, I know that there are some that open at 5:30. Doesn't matter if it closes at 4? No. Frankly, none of the information we place here is absolutely critical. Because again, we're going through a whiteboard challenge. We're going to make a lot of assumptions, and we're going to make a lot of low-risk assumptions. So the question is 5:30 too early in the morning for this to be a reasonable assumption? And the answer is absolutely not. Nobody cares. It makes no difference. I could say 7. That's fine. If I said 9, that would be questionable. And that would be more questionable really in the respect of, why would I, as a designer, suggest that something that is made for people who have things to do in the morning, people who generally drink coffee, would only go there after 9 in the morning? And maybe that's fine, maybe not. It doesn't really make any difference. Either way, it's a low-risk assumption to say it's opening at 5:30. But really, what we want to know is when is rush hour? And there's a good reason why. If we know when it is the busiest, then we have a good sense for the overall limitations that our product is going to have. Or maybe more specifically, what are the boundaries? What is the overall box that we need to focus on for this product? So, forgetting necessarily when rush hour is, we can just make it up. Let's say rush hour is 8 to 9. Oh, let's make it even more accurate, 7:30 to 8:30. And we'll say that because people come into work between 8:30 and 9, often 9 o'clock. Some people are ending up taking their kids to school before 8, things like that. Those are all reasonable assumptions to make. And therefore, it's more likely that the most people would be going into a coffee shop around 7:30 to 8:30. Again, doesn't really matter, but what is defined as rush hour? And this is where we're going to make another quick assumption. So if we assume it's a coffee shop in, it doesn't really matter what the location is, but we can say if it's a suburban area, lower population if it's a city or an urban area, higher population if it's out in the middle of nowhere, much lower population. In other words, each type of coffee shop will have a different expectation for what rush hour is defined as. So in this case, let's say, okay, rush hour is for a standard city-style coffee shop, not in downtown. We don't want it to be crazy. We're going to make something more reasonable, but let's say 200 people in an hour. Let's say 200 customers per hour. Now, 200 customers per hour might be a lot. But this begs the next question, which is, well, if it's 200 customers in 1 hour, we don't have one barista working. And we know from the prompt and also from having gone to coffee shops throughout our lives that it's very rare to see one person working at a coffee shop, unless it's the owner and they never get a real rush hour. Now, if that's the case, then how many people can be serviced as customers by baristas? And I would say that there's two ways to figure this out. Number one, make an assumption, work your way back. And that's totally fine. Number two is let's set up some data so that we can make some of these decisions for us. So number one is, we'll skip the first option. We'll try the second option now. So we've got 200 customers per hour. What are the drinks? So let's come back. So we're selling coffee, right? So now we can say coffee comes in 3 order types. Or maybe that's probably how we should list this, order types. So we know number one is drip coffee. Drip coffee is very easy to make. It probably takes anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes to actually make it, but it takes 10 seconds to actually fill up a customer's cup for it. So we'll say, because we don't really care right now about restocking, let's say, we'll consider this 10 seconds per cup. So very easy, very quick, very painless. We don't really care. Option 2 for drink orders is specialty coffees. Now, specialty coffees, I'd say, for a coffee shop is probably the norm. And that would probably be defined as any order that is coffee that is not drip coffee. So frappuccino, cappuccino, latte, you name it, whatever, that's what it is. So how long does that take to make? And that actually can vary wildly. So we'll put in 3 to 7 minutes per cup. Now, because of that huge variation, we'll say 5 minutes average, just to make things nice and round, not a big deal. So the third one we'll come back to. That didn't work out. Oh, that's not what we wanted at all. All right, here we go. 5 minutes average, and then option 3, and we'll come back to option 3 a little later. Now, if we've got those 2 major drink order types, drip coffee, specialty coffee, we can make a couple of quick assumptions. If we've got 200 people in 1 hour placing orders, and let's say on average 80% of orders are specialty coffee with a 5-minute average, 80% of 200 would be 160, so 160 times 5 minutes would be, math. All right, so let's go like this. Yeah, my calculator showed up. Here we go. 180. Oh no, I said 160 times 5. Is that what I said? Yes. And then times 5 minutes. Right. And if we divide that by 60, so we're spending 13 hours worth of time. No, I'm doing some mad math here. Oh, no, that's actually correct. And then we divide that by 5 again. No, I'm doing some bad math. So I'm just going to stop that right now. I'm clearly off on something. But my point is we've got to calculate. So we've got to calculate something pretty simple. We've got 5 minutes per cup. We've got 5 baristas doing doing that many drinks. So that means we'll be able to make 25 drinks in. No, sorry. We should be able to make 5 drinks every 5 minutes. So, or 1 drink a minute if we want to make it that way, which means that we should be able to service roughly 200 customers in an hour, roughly speaking. It's not perfect, but it's rough. If that's the case, that means we need at least 5 baristas to handle all drink orders, assuming that most people order the average drink type. Nothing crazy there. So the last detail we really need is to handle rush hour traffic. At least 5 baristas must be working. Now, at this point, we've got a lot of information, and it really begs the question, but what are we doing? Like, what is the product still? So we know it's some sort of system to handle drink orders. So this is one thing that I highly recommend in the event that you're more of a visual style learner. Start drawing it out. I don't know exactly what it should look like, but I know that we're working in a coffee shop. We're baristas. If we're putting ourselves in the shoes of our user, in this case, the baristas at hand. And so if that's the case, then the question is, well, what are they going to do? And, we know we're in a coffee shop. So let's add some additional details here. So the user interface. Well, they're probably not going to be using a phone. 2 reasons why. Number 1, phones are small. Even if you're having using a larger phone like this one, it's going to be pretty small. One-handed or even two-handed use is not really what we're looking for. What we're really looking for is a stable screen. So we're talking about a tablet, or we're talking about a computer monitor. Now, we can talk about some of the specifics there, but in either case, the idea should be that we want to be able to view, well, actually, that begs the question, what do we want to do? What is the system really here for? So we need a way to manage these drink orders. And if we've got 5 baristas working simultaneously, and so now we know we've got a couple of major requirements. So number 1 is baristas must view drink orders. And that leads to a couple of basic things. So like number 1, we probably need to see what the drink order is. So let's just go like this and we'll make a couple of copies of it. And we'll say that a drink order consists of, well, actually that's a good question. So what does a drink order consist of? So it'll probably be the customer name, followed by the drink title. So that might be like a latte or a cappuccino or whatever. Followed by drink specifications. Because every coffee, if it's ordered as is, then this might be empty. But if it's ordered with, I don't know, half and half or skim milk or whatever you could think of, that would go there at some point. And that's probably all we really need to know. As long as a barista can have the instructions on what it is that they need to make, which is the specifications and the title, and they know who the customer is so they can say the name once the drink is done, that's all you really need. So we can leave that as is. Cool. Okay, so we know that the drink orders, the requirements are drinks, let's say orders have name, well, let's say customer name, drink title, and specifications. Easy enough. So now the next question is, okay, so if we have 5 baristas working, how do any of them take ownership of one of these drink orders? Or is this a system of display only? And I think that's a fair question for any designer, meaning we've got a lot of stuff happening. The coffee shop is busy, it's active, people are noisy, there's music in the background, any number of things can be happening. But what exactly should our baristas be doing aside from making drinks? So we know that, well, they're definitely going to be making the drinks, and they have to be viewing these drinks. So let's add a separate use case point over here. Baristas, while making drinks, hear customers talking, music, each other making drinks. It's a busy work environment. And they also have to be physically making the drinks. Coffee's hot. Milk and, let's say, I don't know, coffee condiments. I can't spell. Mints are sticky, gross, right? Need to wash hands frequently. And therefore, what we use as an interface device needs to be able to handle that. So I might say, okay, well, we could use a tablet. That might mean an Android tablet. Some of them are pretty cheap, but that's kind of challenging. Now, they come in different sizes, blah, blah, but no matter what we end up with, we have this open-ended question of why? Why do we need that device type? And I'd argue that considering, having worked in a restaurant, typically you'll end up having some sort of computer system for point of sale. It's usually a touch screen and usually a cheap touch screen. So we'll say it's a computer monitor, touch screen. I'll even go the distance and say it's a resistive display, which if you have a GPS in your car or have ever used one of the older smartphones from, let's say, 15 years ago, you couldn't just tap with your finger. You actually had to push down and put force onto the screen, and that would activate the button press. Those still exist. Restaurants use them all the time. Anyways, so if that's the case and that's what we're looking for, then the next question is, what do we really need in that? So we now know if that's the case, the user interface is button only. No swipe gestures, so no gesture control whatsoever. And that's totally fine. We can live with that. Because again, the idea here is we want to make the process for baristas easy. We want to simplify how they go through everything. We want to make sure that they don't make mistakes. Mistakes, that's a good thing. So drink mistakes probably happen fairly regularly. What happens if a barista accidentally makes the wrong drink or uses the wrong ingredient for a drink? Now, especially if it's something that somebody might be allergic to, that's a big potential issue. But that begs the use case question. So what if a barista makes a mistake with a drink? So that's going to lead us down another road. We'll come back to it. Let's return to the ownership question. Do baristas need to take ownership of a drink order? I would argue yes. And the reason I'd argue yes in this case is because if we've got 5 baristas working simultaneously, it's very, very possible that someone, somewhere, will make the same drink that another barista made. Because, you know what? It's probably going to happen, especially if things are busy, if it's an active work environment, and if there are multiple drink orders that are very similar. We might have a situation, let's say, that's going to be like this, where the customer name might be, Dan versus this, let's not do that, versus this one that'll be Danny, right? And if their drinks are the same or very similar, like this is a cappuccino, and this is, let's just say the same thing, but this one has a skim versus, I don't know, let's say he wants almond milk. Almond. It's pretty easy to make a mistake. Or, even worse, It may not be the customer, or it may not be the barista that makes a mistake. It might be the customer that makes a mistake. So if we call out Danny and we call out Dan, and then they take the wrong ones, and neither one notices until they leave or they walk out of the store, and then they both come back saying, "Oh, hey, wrong drink," or maybe even just one of them comes back, what happens? So we'll come back to that use case. But if that is the use case, and therefore if we know that we might have any number of different types of drinks that are going to be coming in, I think ownership makes more sense, because then the person that made the drink can fix it. And separately, we also now eliminate the possibility of additional mistakes getting made. It might mean some extra work up front, but it might end up saving us time long term. Now, this is where if I were actually getting interviewed for a job, and I would say exactly what I just said, I would also stipulate that this is something that we'd want to test thoroughly in advance of actually just producing a product that did this. It may turn out that having too many steps early on is too complicated for baristas and requires additional training before it can be integrated. If that's the case, fine, but we still need to test it. And if it's not the case, even better, then we can keep going. But we would need to confirm to know with certainty that that is the correct thing to do. Now let's say that we decide that, you know what, we're going to add in that button. We're going to say that button is take ownership, right? Probably too long of a title, but I can take it. So if I take that ownership, what does that mean? Well, for the time being, we'll assume that as a requirement, take ownership means one barista, quote unquote, owns that drink order. In other words, if I push that button, so now I might go like this, and now things are going to get interesting. We'll make a separate version over here. Oh, we don't want to copy it yet. And let's just select all of that and move it over so it's a little closer. So now if I have ownership, let's say I click that button, then, and in fact, we'll even go like this, just to put it a little lower. If I have ownership, then what happens when I click on it? Well, maybe it's return ownership, right? I don't need to always be the owner, quote unquote, the owner of that order. Maybe I can cancel that I've taken that ownership role for that order. And that makes sense because, well, if I take it, if I say I'm going to make this drink and then I spill coffee all over myself and I have to go take a 5-minute break or whatever, I should not require that the customer has to wait now for me as the barista. Someone else should be able to take it. In fact, it may even be possible, and this is something that we'll probably skip for the time being, for one barista to take ownership from another barista who has already taken ownership of the drink. But again, that might be a little too much for the time being. Now, if you can take ownership, that means that the other thing you should be able to do is complete a drink order. So let's go like this. We'll duplicate the button and we'll say mark complete. Now, if the drink is marked as complete, that means that we have, well, we will eventually have a list of completed drink orders, which is like, oh, we have all these drink orders that need to be completed and they need to be marked complete. And in the event that somebody makes a mistake and I need to be able to go back and confirm that, oh yeah, we did make that drink and we did do it incorrectly, we'll probably want to have the option to list what those drink orders are, where those errors are. So why don't we just go over here like so. Oops, that's too far. And we'll just add in receipts. Or we could just say, let's say drink history. Easy enough. Now, if we have a drink history button, that means that now if I select it, I should, in theory, be able to see a full list of previously made drinks, and from that list, be able to decide what to do with it and where to go. So with all that in mind, now I know that we have another feature to add in. Let's throw it into that list of requirements. And for the record, as far as requirements versus features, It's not a bad idea to absolutely have a full list of features. And in fact, I highly recommend it. I'm only keeping it as a list of requirements so that we can eventually make that list of features expressed properly. Right now, the requirements help dictate what does the application do so that we can make that list of features in order to provide that all of those requirements are fulfilled. So we need to have a drink history that shows all drink orders placed. So we've got that. We added it in. We don't have the details for it now, but we have another feature that we did not mention, which was if I can take ownership, I also have to be able to mark orders as complete. So what happens? So if I click on the Take Ownership button, I get the option to return the ownership, put it back in the queue, which begs the question. We have a queue. We've got a queue right now of just this example of 6 drink orders, but we started off with the suggestion that it could be up to 200 in 1 hour. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot of orders. And we also know that this is only for 2 of the major types. We've got a third type. And that third type is, well, what happens if any customer walks in or goes online and places an order? And we haven't even talked about online orders yet. But what if somebody comes and places an order for 2 drinks? How does that display? And that would be our third order type, multi-drink order. And for the time being, for the sake of this whiteboard challenge, I'm going to skip it. I'm going to skip it because a multi-drink order seems very complicated. If it's 2 drinks and they're the same and somebody just wants to get 2 drip coffees, obviously that's very easy. But let's think of the actual use case and how that works. You walk into a coffee shop. You say, I want 2 drip coffees, just 2 coffees, black, nothing special. Usually what ends up happening, in my experience, is the person at the cash register, who may or may not be a barista, technically speaking, will say, great, they'll turn around, they'll get 2 coffee cups, they'll pour it, it'll take 10 to 20 seconds, they'll turn around, they'll say, here you go, it'll be X number of dollars, and you're done. You pay, you take your coffee, you leave. That whole exchange will take anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute in that use case. Now, let's assume it's a different use case. Same exact order type, except instead of 2 drip coffees, I say I need a Frappuccino and I need a, cafe latte with skim milk. Now we've got a very different expectation. Now the person at the cash register says, okay, great, I'm going to place the order. We'll call your name. What's your name? I give my name, James, and they say, okay, great, it'll be a few minutes. Just go wait, and we will call your name when you're done. In that case, I'm going to walk away. I'll probably stay inside or I'll wait by the drop-off desk, whatever that is, and I'll wait the 3 to 10 minutes it takes to make both of those drink orders. If that's the case, that means I might end up with a situation where I'll have something similar to this, where I might say, okay, so let's go like this. We'll just copy over here, and I'll copy this over as well. And if it's a multi-drink order, I might have even a special icon, like it might be like this. And again, I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go along. And it might have like a big M on it, where if I select it, it might open up to, let's say it might go like this, and I might say drink 2, right? It might even go to drink 3, drink 4, drink 5, etc. And that begs the question, this is why I think it's too complex for this short time frame. Who's going to take ownership of drink 2 or drink 5 or X number of drinks that there are? Because if one barista is taking ownership of the whole thing, that's a much bigger challenge, especially if we're trying to fulfill a rush hour of 200 customers placing orders. We might have somebody through Postmates who's picking up for an entire office, and suddenly it's a question of, oh, how do we fulfill on this 10-drink order while we've got another 70 orders in the queue? That's a very difficult question to answer. I don't know that we can answer it for the time being, so we're going to skip it. We're going to come back to it if we have time, but for the moment, we'll skip it. So we had the use case of baristas making drinks. We had the use case of mistakes. Well, with the mistake, we had the drink history button, which would theoretically lead to a number of places. We can get back to that. So we have this whole system in place. Now, we don't know if the system is complete yet. We're going to assume it isn't. Just assume any product you're working on is not complete ever. So if baristas at a coffee shop need a way to capture and review in-store and online orders from order customers. So do we do that? Well, right now, what we're missing is where does the point of sale system, where does the cash register or the online store play a role in this product? Well, we can make a couple of assumptions. Number one is we can say it doesn't, it's a separate product, but that all orders funnel into this system, whatever it's called. That's a fair assumption to make, especially considering that most coffee shops already have point of sale systems, or if they use some sort of system today, which if they are currently operational, they do. Then we know that they are working however they're working, and we'll go with that in mind. So totally fine. Now, the next question would be, if the case is that they have some sort of system, why do they need a new system? Now, that was something that in theory we could have asked initially. The reason I'm only asking it now is because, in my opinion, it's an irrelevant question as far as this whiteboard challenge and frankly as far as a product is concerned. For the sake of doing research and understanding what is the competition doing, how does this product really work, what are the requirements of it, it's a great question to ask. The reason I find that it's not necessarily helpful here is because we can't do much research at all. We have a limited amount of time, but more importantly, we're asked to build a system, and that system requires many individual things that are very, very small. Like, I need to know what the drink title's name is. I need to know who the customer is. And these all just kind of require a little bit of know-how and a little bit of understanding of what does a coffee shop do. So it's a good question to ask because we want to know what does a coffee shop do today. So I might say, well, what does Starbucks do? Or what does Coffee Bean or Pete's do? Nobody knows with absolute certainty unless you've worked there because it's not a free or it's not an available system to just go and view. But we can make assumptions. And that's why I went through in that pattern. Now, with that in mind, if this is the system in place and we've got 5 baristas, the next question is, if I am user 1, let's say barista number 1. So what does that mean in the context of this entire product? Let's say barista number 1 is on this screen, and we've got barista number 2 on this screen. Now, if barista number 2 sees this screen and barista number 1 sees the screen on the left, then first of all, the screens should be all connected. Easy enough. We can say it's an online system, or we can say it's an internal system, like that it's on their intranet. Frankly, it doesn't really matter for our purposes. But it does bring up the use case, which is, oops, that's not what we wanted. We wanted this one. The use case is multiple baristas are logged in simultaneously using the system to manage drink orders. Where, let's say where manage means take ownership of, make, and complete. So if that's the case, and by the way, this also does beg the question, well, what happens if I, as a barista, realize, oh, we're out of, I don't know, skim milk. What do I do? Like, how do I, as a barista, manage that here? So is there an edit button for the order? And maybe that means that we would need an edit button. We can just go ahead and over here and say edit, maybe, right? And if that's the case, we'll add in, let's say now's a good time to include a list of features. So let's say features, and we'll go MVP, and then separately we'll have a list of features that is not MVP. So we'll go like this. Non-MVP. And so we know from that we've got one non-MVP feature already, which is edit drink orders. We don't really need it. There's no absolute requirement. If a customer placed an order and they say, I want it with skim milk, and then the barista's going through it and they're trying to make the drink and they're like, oh, we're out of skim milk, they'll probably call the person by name. So it'd be like, hey, James, we have a question for you. Excuse me, your drink order, we can't complete it as requested. We're out of skim milk. Would you like half and half instead, or whatever? And if the answer is whatever it is, oh no, cancel my drink order, or oh no, do this, oh no, do that, great. I, as a barista, can go and do that. I don't need to enter it into the system. It would be great if I could, but is it absolutely necessary? Probably not. Now, just based off of our initial set of requirements, we have a handful of features. So manage drink orders, and we'll break that down. We'll say take ownership, not edit, because that's separate. Well, actually, let's make it even simpler, because features can be pretty open-ended. So let's start off with take ownership of a drink order. And that's going to beg a question, which is why I started with the Barista 1 versus Barista 2. Who can take ownership, and how is that organized? So if Barista 1 is myself, and let's say Barista 2 is, I don't know, let's say Kyle. I'm making up a name. Then Kyle over here can take ownership of drink 1, if this is drink 1, unless I have ownership. Now, we might want to say another separate non-MVP feature is take ownership from another barista, right? Maybe that's something we'll want to do, maybe not. Is it absolutely necessary on day 1? No. Why? Well, I can just tell Kyle in this case, I'm taking a break. Can you take my drink for me? And there's 2 ways that can work. Number 1 is I can push the button, which means if, just like here, I have return ownership, I can return ownership before I leave. Now, obviously, there's going to be the basic use case of I, as a barista, walked out without returning ownership into the queue. And there's 2 ways that can be handled. Way number 1 is I, as the barista who's left, don't have any control anymore, meaning I'm out of the building. Let's say I'm taking a smoke break. Somebody can use my station and push the button for me. That's the way number 1. Way number 2 is somebody would take ownership of the drink order from me. So if we say that this, let's make it simple. We'll go like this. So this drink order and this drink order are the same. I'm not going to pick the same color. They're the same drink order. They're the same, let's just call it the same color. If they're the same drink order and I already have ownership, or let's say in this case, Kyle as barista number 2 has ownership and I can take ownership, I can choose to take ownership from Kyle. And the way that that can work is if I click that button, there might be a pop-up that shows up that just says Kyle, or let's say in this case, barista number 2, since we wouldn't use names most likely, but that's actually something to figure out, currently has ownership. If they can't complete the order, confirm here. Let's say that will give us another button. We'll just make sure that that button has a different style, like that, and it'll be a confirm. And again, I'm not here to make sure this looks good. I'm just here to make sure that it's very, very clear. So now, in a workplace environment, this sort of process makes sense. I, as one employee, will take ownership from another employee for whatever reason. If I don't have that right, that's an open question. Should that right be accessible? Again, this is a non-MVP feature, so we're going to leave it at that. And we'll actually just delete this for the time being. For the sake of the video, it's fine. I would remove it, or I would move it to the side to say this is something else to work on in the future, but for this MVP product, we don't really need it right now. So, as a existing MVP feature, I can take ownership of a drink order. I can return ownership of a drink order. I can mark a drink order complete. And so we were talking briefly about the point of sale system, or really how does this handle online versus in-store orders? So now we have to add another requirement. Let's say separate online versus in-store orders. Now, that's a little bit more difficult to describe. Like, how does that work? And why does it matter? So if I have, if our store, if our coffee shop has 10 people in line, That means we've got a queue eventually of 10 orders. We might end up fulfilling, let's say, 3 of those orders before we get to the 10th order on our queue, meaning we won't have that order placed, not created, not made, not fulfilled, just placed before our 3rd order is fulfilled, which means our queue will be 7 by the time order number 10 is placed. But we might have 200 orders, and we might have a long queue for it. Now, that queue will always be growing until we no longer making or placing new orders, which means that we might have a queue, let's say, of maybe a maximum of 100 at any given time. That means that we might need this to be a scrollable page. Really, we don't need to know about that right now. But what we do need to know is if this is going to have a large queue, how is that queue going to be handling online versus in-store orders? So let's use a basic use case. We've got 10 people in line, or let's even use the more serious use case of the rush hour situation. We've got 50 people in line to the extent that we've got people outside the store. We can even say in our current COVID environment, we've got the majority of the line outside of the store because we don't want people in the store. People are placing orders online, but they're also coming in both to pick up orders as well as place orders. So we've got 50 people in line and a customer places an order online after that 50th person is in line. Does that, let's say 20th person, is that person going to be happy if somebody comes in and picks up an order before them? And the answer is probably no. But the better question might be, or the better, more challenging use case might be, if I am number 20 in line and I'm just standing in line, I'm waiting, it's taking a long time, if I go on my phone and place an order and then I get my order fulfilled before I get to place my order in the line, meaning I'm standing in line as an in-store customer, but I place an order as an online customer, does the person in front of me, are they going to be happy? How many people in front of me are going to be unhappy and therefore dissatisfied with the service considering that? And with all that in mind, can a store even fulfill my order as an online order if they've got a line of 50 people? Probably not, especially if it takes on average a minute per drink per barista. Therefore, we need to be able to make sure the queue is handled appropriately. So if that queue exists, we need to have a separate use case for it, where that use case is going to probably be defined as something like online orders have a minimum of, and I'll just make this up, 15 minutes per order and a maximum of 1 hour to fulfill. Now, I just made that rule up. And what that means is if we've got 100 people in the queue and an online order comes in, that order number is now 101. Does that make perfect sense? Maybe not. Maybe instead of that order going in as 101, in the queue, it would go in because we want to fulfill online orders and in-store orders. Maybe that would go into like place 80 or place 70. But it's hard to tell. Like, we would need to test that pretty heavily to know, number one, what is the expectation for online versus in-store orders, especially considering today's COVID climate. And then separately, what is the expectation for this particular location? Because if we've got multiple coffee shops that we're working with, it may be that this one has lots of in-store orders, but very few online, versus the second one, which might have the reverse. So it will make a big impact on all those factors. But if we make a very simple MVP rule, and we'll just call that the MVP feature of online orders are placed at 15-minute increments depending on the queue size, that would mean that if our queue, and we'll even add in up to 1 hour. So if the average time it takes to make one drink per barista per minute, well, is roughly 1 per minute, that would mean that if it takes 15 minutes, every 15 orders should, an online order can fill in if there's only one online order. So it wouldn't just work for one order at a time. If we get 10 online orders and we got 50 people in store, it would have to go back and forth. And I don't know the math. I am not going to figure it out. Clearly, my math skills are awful. So we're not going to touch that one yet. And as far as we're concerned for a point of sale system, that might matter. But we made the assumption earlier that there already exists a point of sale system. We don't need to build a new one. We don't need to design a new one. All drink orders that come into our system are from the point of sale system. So that means if there's an online store, whether it's a WordPress site or whatever, we're not touching it. We're not designing it. It exists. So somebody somewhere has built an API, and we will just say, cool, it's going to funnel into our system, and how it works there will be based on that use case and this feature. So we've got our system in place. We have the option to take ownership. Now, the one thing with ownership that is still a little bit iffy is if we've got 5 baristas, that means that in theory, we've got 5 workstations. Considering that it's a coffee shop, each workstation will function a little differently, meaning not every coffee shop has 5 espresso machines, 5 coffee grinders, if they even use coffee grinders, 5 of this machine and 5 of that machine. Chances are there's a mix of all of them, and so therefore it's very likely that one barista might jump between various stations and do so with pretty high frequency, especially during a rush hour. So there might be one workstation that I, as barista number 1, will focus at, where I will spend the majority of my time. But there's no guarantee that's going to be the case, especially if this system is going to be used at multiple locations where no workstation will be identical. So we might end up with a situation where I might click to take ownership. But the question is, what happens when I actually click that button? Does it just automatically show the return ownership button and maybe change the background color of the order, or does something else happen? So let's use this case. We'll go like this. We'll copy these, this set. We'll go like so, and we'll put in the take ownership button. That's not what we want. Take this. We'll go throw it in here. Now, if I click the take ownership button, maybe what can happen, or what should happen, is we'll go like this. We'll see a pop-up. We'll change the color. Go like this. And that color will, that pop-up will say something like, or instead of actually saying anything, maybe it'll have 2 separate windows, and they'll be pretty large. We'll go like this. We'll change the color here. And this one will say, I am barista, and we'll just put it in quotations, barista number 1. And then separately, we'll throw in, because we know we've got 4 other users, we'll throw in 4 other buttons. Go like that, go like that, go like that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to make it perfect anyways, because who listens? But therefore, we would have barista 2, barista 3, etc. And therefore, we can actually track who is making what drink. In other words, I, as barista number 1, will click the take ownership button. This pop-up shows up. I will quickly, because I am barista number 1, will push this. Pretty easy. I'm not really adding a lot of additional work. And for anybody who's worked in a restaurant or a coffee shop or had to deal with a system like this, like a point of sale system, this is an easy process. It doesn't really require any more to do one button versus one button, another quick one. Especially if I am now at a separate workstation. If I was at this workstation and I had all of this going on here, oh, that's not what I wanted. Let's see if I can copy this correctly. Probably not, but it should be fine. If I have that same system or same button scheme here, but I am now barista number 2, if I'm at barista number 2 station, but I'm barista number 1, I would, well, obviously this would be reversed. Go like this, and this button would be reversed as well, but then I would be very quick to be able to say, okay, take ownership, and then push the barista number 1 button. In other words, not only would I be able to take ownership at another workstation without having to do any crazy stuff, separately, I would also be able to log in to one workstation, log out, or switch the other workstation to the other barista, and do so without causing any major challenges, which now leads us to a new feature. It does beg the question, is this an absolute MVP feature? And I would say maybe, maybe not. It may not be critical on day one. I don't know. We're going to throw it into the not MVP feature list just because we're not sure. And we'll say choose a barista from drink ownership, right? And that's not a great description. Fair enough. But we just listed it here very quickly just to be able to talk it through. And now we've got it. And this is a pretty good set of features. It's not full. Obviously, based on the requirements, we've definitely got more features to add in. But if we were to say, because it's almost 5 o'clock here, and that means we're about 55 minutes in, we should really be taking a few minutes to review the step-by-step for this product. So, baristas at a coffee shop need a way to handle and manage drink orders online and in-store. How do they do that? Well, number one is that they have this really simple computer-based but touchscreen interface design system that shows a row of all orders in a queue. That queue is determined by the way that the point of sale system, both online and in-store, will bring in orders. Each order will include 3 major details: what the customer's name is, what the drink title is, and what the specifications of the drink are. This is currently handling 2 of 3 drink order types: drip coffee as well as specialty coffee, which accounts for all other coffee type drinks. A third drink order type that cannot be handled in this case right now is multi-drink orders. With that in mind, baristas handle drink orders by taking ownership of each order that they take, meaning they will take an order that's been placed by a customer, they will push the take ownership button, then they will go ahead and make the drink. As a separate potential MVP feature, they can also switch workstations and complete ownership, meaning take ownership of that drink at a different workstation without having to log in and log out, by a simple button, as you can see here. Each drink will be, once the barista's taken ownership, they'll have 2 things that they can do aside from actually making the drink and fulfilling the order. Number 1 is marking the order as completed and therefore fulfilling it. Number 2 is to return ownership of that drink, or really more specifically, returning it to the queue so that another barista can handle that drink order themselves. Lastly, at least for the moment, there will be a drink history button, which will then lead to a full page displaying all drink orders that have currently been, or that have already been placed and fulfilled, in the event that there are any customers who come in with any issues or complaints about their drink orders. Whew. Now, that was about 55, 56 minutes to complete. There's obviously more that could be done. There's always more that can be done. What was missed? Well, we know a number of things. Number 1 is we never determined who baristas are and whether it makes a difference or not. I'll quickly say that baristas typically are anywhere from the age of, let's say, 16 to 25 on average. They're usually people who are not working at Starbucks as a career. They're people who are in school, and depending on which state you're in and what the laws are for how young you can be to actually work, you might even have people who are younger than 16. All that said, these are people who are working as a part-time job. Coffee shops don't typically have people working full-time unless they're managers. I could be wrong about that. That's a complete assumption. But that means that this is a user type that probably knows how to handle technology fairly easily. Nothing crazy there. Did we really need to know what that information was? In this case, it turns out no, not hugely relevant. What about our customers? Well, lots of people buy coffee, especially in the morning. We could make an argument that anybody could walk into a coffee shop. It's not a good argument. I would suggest instead that if we were to just talk it through really quickly, we'd say, well, customers coming into a coffee shop during rush hour, which is really the major use case that we're trying to fulfill on, are likely, because it's between 7:30 and 8:30 in the morning, based on our assessment earlier, that they are likely one of 3 or 4 major user types. Parents who are coming in before or after dropping their kids off at school, which means they're probably between the age of 25 to 45, and possibly on their way to work. Professionals who are on their way to work, probably between the age of, let's say, 25 or maybe even younger, let's say 22, through, let's say, 65. That's probably good enough. We could go into more detail, but as far as we're concerned for um, the information that we have, that's fine. Especially since we don't have a specific location for a coffee shop. We don't know if it's in the city. We made the assumption it is, but we don't know anything else about it. We also don't know if this is a specialty coffee shop, like if it's not Starbucks, but some place that a drink will cost twice as much or three times as much versus a small mom and pop coffee shop. And the location in the country might make a difference as well. On the West Coast here, it's going to be very different than on the East Coast. That's fine. So we didn't make any of those decisions, so it's harder to determine what the user types are going to be in that respect. And we've covered pretty much everything else. There are very few things left to figure out with this product. The only thing I know, and I was thinking about it but didn't have time to reflect on it too deeply, was the option to edit the drink order, which isn't that important. Again, it's a separate non-MVP feature. But what about when an order is fulfilled? What happens? Like, if I mark this order complete, does it just disappear, go into the drink history list, and then the next one comes up in the queue? And I think that we could actually do a little better than that. I think we could probably have a pop-up that actually does two things. One, suggests what the drink type is, meaning is it an online order or is it in-store order, meaning do I put it at this desk or that desk? That'll be easier because, well, I won't know where to put it. And if I call the name out and the person who placed the online order hasn't gotten to the store yet, oftentimes what they'll do as a customer is they'll walk in, they'll wait, and they'll keep waiting until somebody calls their name or until they get frustrated, go over to the desk and start turning drinks to look for their name. Now, whatever that case is, we actually don't want people doing that. And so it would be great if there was some sort of system to stop that. Now, if I am just focusing on the system, meaning this application, that's not really a possibility. However, if the option is I can place it at the right window at the very least, and that window is like called out to, like there's a banner in the store that says online orders, then at least anybody who comes to pick up their online order will see that there's a drink at that station that no one's touched yet, or X number of drinks, and they might go check it out. The other thing we could do there is actually have a different background color for the table, for the not the table, the row that would indicate whether it's an in-store versus online order. It's not that big of a deal. It could be done. Doesn't have to be done. I would leave that up to a graphic designer to determine what are the best colors to figure out for that. But I think it's a good subtle way to provide baristas a mechanism, just a simple way so they don't have to think about it. But with a little bit of training, they'll get used to saying like, okay, great, this green means it's an online order. This blue means it's an in-store order, whatever. It really makes no difference what the color is, or maybe it does, we just don't know. But once we have that color figured out, as the baristas keep using the product, they'll get used to it and they won't even have to read that pop-up. In fact, we could even use that as a training mechanism. The only other feature that could be done, and it's definitely not an MVP feature, that I could think of here, aside from the handling of multi-drink orders, is, well, what happens if I am a new barista, or if this specialty drink requires a unique way of building it, or our coffee shop is a huge chain like a Starbucks or a Pete's or whatever, and suddenly the head office says, hey, we're all doing this new drink now, train your employees, your baristas to do it. Could this system also be used for educational purposes? Meaning, if I tapped on one of these rows, would it show me what the details of the drink order are? Can I watch a video to see how to make that drink order? Is that something that the company would really want? Those are all open questions. Who knows? But it's something that can absolutely be done. It wouldn't be difficult at all to design that in here. And there you go. That would be a fairly straightforward way of going through this particular prompt. Again, every single product will be unique. Every single product will have its own differences and own way to handle it. This is just the first part of a series. I'll be doing probably another 5 to 10 over the next coming weeks. So stay tuned. Obviously, feel free to send over any questions. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them. I'm still practicing this myself. So thank you for watching, and take care.